thank you to the Blue Island Library for having me here tonight. And thanks everyone for joining. I hope you find this next hour useful and find something that you can use in your own space. So to that point, as people are still joining us, if you'd like to drop in the chat what brought you here tonight, what you hope to learn, how you feel about Marie Kondo and the KonMari method, anything you'd like to add in the chat that would be helpful as we get started, so I can make sure that I cover topics that are of interest to you and make the best use of your time here tonight. Dennis and I were just talking about spring being a popular season for this presentation and this topic with spring cleaning, or a lot of organizers like to call it spring clearing. And I'll talk a little bit later about kind of the difference between cleaning and clearing. But yeah, it's a time of newness and freshness, and people want to bring that to their space too. So we'll be talking about ways to do that. So anything that you're hoping to learn tonight, or anything that you, topics related to organizing or a particular area in your home that you would like some support with, or a particular category of items that, that you find challenging. A lot of people talk about paper, I feel like, in library presentations. Paper can be a challenge with organizing, and we'll talk about that in the context of the KonMari method too.
I think something for me is I'd be interested in maybe stuff that I'm kind of nostalgic for, but don't really have a place to put or anything. So I don't know, solutions for stuff like that.
Yes, we will talk about that. Yeah, for sure, that can be a challenge. And that can come up in every room. Oh, I see in the chat, organization of photos. Yes, along those same lines with that Dennis was mentioning of sentimental items. So photos, sentimental items in the KonMari method have a particular order within the method. We try to save those for last, because those can be difficult. So going through other items and building up a decision-making muscle around, making decisions around other items before trying to move forward with decisions on items that are maybe a little bit more challenging. And with photos, there are particular tips around photos, so I'll talk about that when we get to sentimental items. Great. Well, as you're thinking of other topics that you'd like to cover tonight, feel free to drop those in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that as we're going. So I'll introduce myself briefly. My name is Megan Spillman. I'm the owner of Peace and Tidy. I am trained in the KonMari method, which was made popular by Marie Kondo. I'll talk a bit about her background. So I am a professional organizer who works mostly in people's homes. During the pandemic, I've worked virtually with some clients, and I'm working with people in their homes again. But that has definitely been impacted by the last 2 years, and the way people feel about their homes has been impacted by the last 2 years, and people spending a lot more time in their homes and thinking about how their homes make them feel and things that they'd like to change about their environments to support their lives. So I love this work. I'm very passionate about this work, and happy to talk about the KonMari method with you tonight. And if I can go to the next slide, we'll get started. Okay, so along the lines of the last 2 years, this was a meme that I think came out towards the beginning of the pandemic, when people were thinking that they were going to take up a lot of hobbies, and maybe did the gardening, the sourdough bread, the organizing was picking up around the beginning of the pandemic as people were spending more time at home. This person is in protest on that. So there's definitely more than one way to do it. I'm going to be talking a lot about the KonMari method. I see the KonMari method as a tool, or as a set of tools that you can use. You can take parts of it, you can take all of it, whatever is useful to you. I don't see it as a rigid method, a rigid framework, but more of like a buffet of tools that you can choose from. So some of what you hear tonight might resonate, some of it might not. Totally fine. Just, you know, take what you feel like is useful. And I see there is another comment in the chat. I'm still holding on to items that hold sentimental value, such as grandmother's dishes, solutions for storage, or just to get rid of. Also, my photos are in albums along with negatives and notations in the album pages. Yeah, definitely. We can find ourselves coming across sentimental items, and it can be very challenging to consider what the next steps might be. So we'll talk about that within the framework of the method. As I mentioned before, sentimental items are last, and there are some tips around sentimental items, but definitely you're not alone coming across items that hold sentimental value and making a decision about those. And having those mixed in with other items that you use every day, that juxtaposition of those items, deciding what to do with them can be a challenge. So that's part of what the method does is kind of help you break out items into different categories to move through making decisions around them. All right. Okay, so this fellow here in this slide is my 6-year-old son. I think he's 4 in this photo, but I think this was towards the beginning of the pandemic when we were getting creative about entertaining ourselves at home. And I think I had given him a home haircut. But the point of this is just to say organizing is not about organizing. It's not, and I think this became clearer during the pandemic when we maybe were having less people in our spaces, and really feeling like, you know, our spaces are for us to enjoy, and the items in our home should support the type of life that we want to live. We have a responsibility for all of the items that we bring into our home. And part of what organizing does is can help you clear out the items that maybe fit in a certain season of life, but now you would like to let go of to make room for other items or just to make room for space. So it's not about a particular aesthetic. People often, there are some people who are interested in the KonMari method from the perspective of minimalism, and that's wonderful. That's, again, one way to approach it, but the KonMari method is not about a particular aesthetic or getting to a certain number of items. It's more about being able to enjoy your space like my son is doing here. He's enjoying his space. I'm not entirely stressed out about the state of the place and what we're doing and how we're playing. We're just able to enjoy our space creatively and have fun and know that we can put it back in order so that we can relax in that space as well as play in that space. To the next slide. Okay, so here's our agenda for the evening. I'm going to be talking about the KonMari method first, just to kind of ground us in the structure of it and give you an idea of how it's different from how a lot of us approach organizing, how I approached organizing before I read Marie Kondo's books. So we'll talk about that first. We'll talk about specific tidying topics and anything else that you'd like to add to the chat. I'll definitely cover sentimental and photos, since I see that is a popular topic with our group tonight. And then I will wrap up with some resources that can help you in your journey if you decide to tackle tidying, or, and I'll use tidying and organizing kind of interchangeably, but I will again leave you with some resources that will hopefully be helpful to you. Okay, so who is Marie Kondo? And by now, I think a lot of people, and especially if you're here tonight joining us, you are probably familiar with Marie Kondo and her background, but I'll share a little bit more about her. She is an entrepreneur, author of New York Times best-selling books. Life-Changing Magic was her first book. So she wrote that book because as an organizer, she was so busy and had such a waiting list that she wanted to be able to reach more people with her method and decided to write her book. So she has actually had somewhat of a lifelong interest in organizing. She describes in one of her books that she was the kid who liked to stay in at recess and help the teacher organize books in the classroom. She liked to organize for her family. She's the middle child, and she would try to organize her parents and her siblings' items, and found out that that didn't really work very well, that you can't make decisions for other people. They tend to not like it. So she kind of found that out the hard way. And she also had a point in her tidying journey where she was so focused on getting rid of items and was really kind of stressing herself out about the letting go of items, and came to a realization that focusing kind of in the other direction and focusing on, well, what are the important items? What are the items that I'm keeping? What are the items that bring me joy, versus the constant letting go of items, really getting clear on the items that spark joy as a way forward, rather than stressing out about what do I need to let go of. So that's a little bit about her background. She started out her career working at an HR recruiting firm, and was working with someone in their office, and started helping him organize his desk. And then he started referring clients to her. So it's really kind of an interesting journey for her as an entrepreneur. She lives in the US now and has 3 children. She had a son, I think, last year. So she has 3 kids. I think they're all under the age of 6. So 3 young children, has Netflix shows. Who knows what's next for her, but interesting to follow her journey. Oh, and I see in the chat, how does the KonMari method differ from Swedish death cleaning? Yeah, I actually I've heard of that book. I need to read it. I haven't read it yet, but from what I understand, there is a little bit of overlap. I mean, I think the focus on Swedish cleaning is to make decisions about your items while you can, rather than letting other people make those decisions for you once you're gone, and getting the enjoyment out of the items while you have them. And yeah, I need to read that book too, and check that out. I think the title is kind of catchy on that one. But yeah, it's just, and there's also, there are 2 gentlemen who have a podcast and wrote a book about minimalism, 2 best friends. So they're all kind of in the same, like, organizing, but and items in your home, and thinking about it from slightly different perspectives. Okay, so quote from Marie Kondo that fits here with the with spring cleaning. So the difference between cleaning and tidying. Tidying is the act of confronting yourself, and cleaning is the act of confronting nature. So confronting yourself is basically confronting the decisions that you made to bring items into your home. So we all make decisions about bringing in items, and then we have responsibility for those decisions, sometimes for longer, depending on what it is, and getting it onto its next location if you decided that it's something that no longer fits for you. And then cleaning is the act of confronting nature, so the buildup of dust and dirt and those types of things. So it's easier to clean when you've cleared, but that's sort of the difference there, and they can get a little bit confused sometimes. Okay, so the 6 rules of tidying up. We'll take these 2 at a time and talk through these. Rule number 1, committing yourself to tidying up. So this is important in the KonMari method, in that there is this focus on what brings you joy. And for a lot of people, organizing continually doesn't bring them joy. For me, it brings me joy. That's why I've chosen to study this and to do this. But for most folks, it's more about committing to doing this to kind of give yourself a fresh start. It's not something that you want to be doing every weekend here and there, or every other weekend here and there. It's something that you want to be able to do, give yourself a fresh start. And then of course there's maintenance. There are always items coming in. So it's not as if, there's a stopping point to it, but it's more about making a really clear, fresh start, so that it's something that you don't feel like you have to be continually doing. So she recommends 6 months, sort of setting that deadline for yourself. Again, that's, not a hard rule. And some people find that that works. And some people find that, based on what's going on in their lives at that time, or based on the size of their home, the number of items that they're confronting and processing. Sometimes they've brought in items from family members. So it can take some more time to process those. So just a rough guideline, and the idea that you're just committing yourself to do it so that it's not a continual part of your life. Imagine your ideal lifestyle. So this is important before getting started, because this gives you information that is going to be helpful in making decisions. So this has also been one of the rules that I find has been challenging in the past 2 years. For some people, their ideal lifestyle involves a lot of social activities that we haven't been able to do in the same way. So one way that I've sort of framed this rule, particularly recently, is thinking of a few guiding words to describe how you'd like to feel in your space, and really letting those words be guides for you, and coming back to those when you're sort of stuck on making a decision about an item. It can give you a little bit of information that might help you move through that decision. So if you've said that your ideal lifestyle, in my case, is having a lot of clear space for my son to be able to run around and play. If I'm saying that, then that might mean that I'm going to make a decision about something that could potentially get in the way of that. And it really kind of grounds you on what your ideal lifestyle is right now. So it might not be what it was 5 years ago, and it might not be what it's going to be in 5 years, but where are you right now? What supports you in your lifestyle right now? Another quote, I have a couple of these sprinkled throughout. The question of what you want to own is actually the question of how you want to live your life. So getting back to this idea of the items that you have in your home, having the responsibility for them. So how do those items match up with the type of life that you want to live? Rule number 3, finish discarding first. So this really addresses what I think most of us, myself included, think about when we think about organizing. A lot of us will take a trip somewhere, Target, Container Store, think about the storage solution, think that the answer is somehow outside of us. If I just had the right shelving, or if I just had more space, or if I just had like certain boxes, that would probably solve this. So this rule challenges us to pause on that. That's not to say that I love a good container store trip myself every once in a while, when I'm intentional about it and I've thought about how I'm really going to use the item. The idea here is to think about discarding first, because you won't actually know what you need in terms of storage items until you know what you're keeping. So thinking that the answer is somehow outside of you in a storage solution is maybe something to question as you're organizing. And another quote here, the clutter has only 2 possible causes. Too much effort is required to put things away, or it's unclear where things belong. And I think this can especially come into play when you share your space with someone else. If it's unclear where things belong and items are left out, those items tend to become sort of a magnet and attract other items. And then the too much effort required to put things away is something that I come across myself too. And if I've stored something in a way that makes it difficult to get to, and I have to move one thing to get to another thing that I'm constantly reaching for, then that's information to me that I should consider making it easier on my future self to put it away. Okay, rules 4 and 5 here. I'm just going to pause for a second and see if anything else came up in the chat, and it looks like not yet. Great. So in addition to this idea of pausing on storage and pausing on that piece of it till further in the process, that's really a cornerstone of the KonMari method. That rule 4 also is tidying by category and not by location. So again, this is what I would do organizing before reading this and before getting into this method. It would be, okay, let me think about organizing this particular space. I've got this much time and I'll organize this particular space. The method challenges us to think more in terms of category. So the categories, I think I have those on one of the following slides, but there are 5 categories in the KonMari method, and they are in a particular order. So getting to rule 5 here. Clothing category is first, clothes, books, then paper, then miscellaneous, which does actually tend to go by location. So miscellaneous is everything that's not clothes, books, paper. So that tends to be kitchen, bathroom, garage spaces. So it does tend to go by location there when you get to miscellaneous. And then the last category is sentimental. So you may find sentimental items in each of the first four categories. And in the method, you would save those items until the end and put them all together in sentimental. So I worked with clients who have sentimental clothing for different reasons. One client in particular had several concert t-shirts, and it was really hard to make that decision about a t-shirt that she felt connected to. At the same time, she's making decisions around clothes that she wears every day. So we put all of those to the side, to the sentimental category, until she was ready to make that decision, until she'd had more experience making decisions about other items, and really getting in touch with what sparks joy for her. So that brings us to, I think, to rule number 6. Oh, we had a quote in between. When we really delve into the reasons for why we can't let something go, there are only 2: an attachment to the past or a fear for the future. So this is something to kind of sit with. And how this comes up when I'm working with folks is the keeping items just in case can indicate that there's a fear that you won't have what you need when you need it. And that can be very valid, and you can honor that. And at the same time, you can also get curious about it. And there are no right answers. There's not, it's not, oh, you should let go of it if you are keeping it just in case. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is appropriate to keep something just in case, but sometimes you may find that you end up having what you need when you need it, or you find an item that you can use in a creative way that you hadn't thought of. So you may already have what you need. The attachment to the past. This can be really challenging, and this comes up with sentimental. Could be attachment to a particular time in your life. It could be, I've seen people who have difficult times, particularly in the clothing category, if they have clothing related to a point in their career, and maybe they've moved on from that, but those clothes are sentimental, and that represents a time in their life and a particular identity that they held in their life, and letting go of that item can feel like, in some ways, letting go of that identity. So again, there are no easy answers on any of it. It's more of just thinking about why it's difficult to let something go, and questioning whether or not it might be related to an attachment to the past or a fear for the future. And then the final rule of tidying up, which is really kind of more like the rules aren't particularly in order, but the sparking joy part of it. So sparks joy, whether or not something spark joy is translated from Japanese. So it's a feeling, I've heard people describe it as more of a heart feeling than a head feeling. And that could be part of the reason why we start with clothes. They're closest to your heart, they're closest to your body, and easier to get a read on that sort of feeling of joy. That's not the case for everyone. For some people, books spark more joy, or sentimental or paper. It's parts of the other categories would spark more joy. But the idea is that setting the joy bar with clothes, because it's something that's close to you and something that's a little bit easier to make that call on whether or not you like it. If we pause for a second and think about, an item of clothing for you, your go-to item, what you feel most confident in, what you enjoy wearing. It doesn't have to be something that you wear a lot. It's just an item that you love. Call these also Hall of Fame items. And you can find Hall of Fame items in every category. But thinking about if you decide to work through the categories, thinking about what are your Hall of Fame items and sort of going to those first and letting those items set the bar for you. And that gives you information as you're processing other items. It doesn't mean that every item has to be at that level. Not everything can spark joy. A pair of scissors might not spark joy, but you need a pair of scissors in your home, possibly. So it's just more about getting in touch with that feeling and letting that give you information as you're making decisions about other items. A few considerations here around tidying. I talked about this recently on another presentation with energy levels. And someone was asking me, how much time should I allot to this? And what time of day should I do this? And my advice would be to think about what that looks like for you. Think about other things that you have going on in your life. Think about getting a good night's sleep, having snacks, having water. Tidying is really, it's physical and it's mental. So you're moving items physically around in your space and you're making decisions about them. And that combination of the two can actually be surprisingly exhausting. So taking it easy on yourself, getting support, whatever that looks like for you. For some people, working with a friend or working with a professional organizer. I've had some people describe what I do as kind of like being a body double for them, because as an organizer, particularly in the KonMari method, our style is not to go in and tell someone what they need to do and make decisions for them. It's more about helping them uncover their intuition around items and helping them uncover their ideal lifestyle, their goals for their life now, and how the items in their home are supporting them in that, and clearing items that they're ready to let go of. But it's not about making the decision. So again, with energy levels and self-care needs, that's going to look different for everyone. So setting realistic expectations with yourself. I would say this to myself. I often am overly optimistic sometimes about how much time something might take or how much energy it might take. And the shows, the Netflix shows, the HGTV shows, they make it seem like everything happens very quickly. It takes a lot more work than that. I know for the Netflix shows that Marie Kondo did, the first seasons at least, she had a team of KonMari consultants behind the scenes who were helping her with it. So you see the episodes and you see her showing up, and it's very like light and pleasant and wonderful and transformative. And the reality is, yes, it is. And there are also people who are working behind the scenes and supporting the folks who are doing that. So just keeping that in mind. The second point here, what's coming in and what's going out. So this is what I kind of call, as I'm working with people, the faucet, the items that are coming in, because realistically, you will bring in new items to your life. But thinking through the pace at which they're coming in and thinking maybe around some boundaries or some loose best practices that you want to set for yourself around the faucet, around online shopping in particular, that makes it easier to bring items to us. Thinking about, I've heard of one consultant who was suggesting maybe putting sort of a 24-hour time frame around decisions on online shopping, if that's helpful. But just keeping in mind that, you know, it can be very exciting when you're clearing space. And then it can also be easy for it to for things to kind of creep back in a way that, you know, you find yourself in the cycle of tidying. So that's sort of where the ideal lifestyle comes in, keeping that in mind as you're tidying and as you're thinking about the faucet and the other items that are coming in. And this last point, the work from home, gym from home, everything from home, is changed a little bit now. I think we're in this time frame where we're trying to figure out what that looks like, and it's different for everyone. But yeah, just keeping in mind that maybe something that we can take from more time at home and using our homes more thoroughly in some ways for learning, for exercising in ways that we hadn't before, is that we can keep joy at the center of it, and we can keep it as a space that brings us joy, and it doesn't have to be necessarily pleasing to other people, but it does have to meet our needs and please us. I'm gonna see if I can turn a light on here. I realize it's getting a little bit dark. I hope it's okay. Okay, so if the KonMari method sounds like a lot, and it is, if you were to do it from clothing to books to paper to miscellaneous to sentimental in your whole home, people do it. If it seems like a lot and you like to take bits and pieces from it, this slide is for you. So these are kind of the high points of the KonMari method and things that you can do without really organizing much in your space. But doing these things might give you a bit of a joy boost. It might be a little bit of an inspiration to start tackling more tidying. I don't think I've talked about gratitude yet, but in terms of the processing of items, if you've seen Marie Kondo's shows or read any of her books, then you'll know that the items that people are letting go of, she encourages people to let go with a thank you, to let go with gratitude. And part of what that does is really helps you let go of any feelings, any conflicting feelings, any shame that you may have around that item for whatever reason. If you feel like, oh, so-and-so bought that for me, gave that to me as a gift, and I feel really bad about letting go of it, or I spent X on this item and I feel like I should get X more uses out of it, or I should get more use out of it. I spent too much on it. Someone gave it to me as a gift. Those are kind of common reasons why it's challenging to let go of something. Letting go of it with a thank you. Thank you for the love and care that someone put into giving it to you as a gift. You can honor that without actually having to hold on to the item itself and have responsibility for keeping the item up. You can honor the feeling that person meant to impart to you. For an item that no longer fits in your life, you can say thank you for that time in your life. Thank you to that item that I bought that I wasn't quite sure about, and now I need to let go of it. Thank you for letting me know what I didn't want. These are kind of some ways to frame the thank you. This is a part that doesn't necessarily resonate with everyone. I do encourage clients I work with to try it. And some have been surprised by how helpful it is in moving them through the process. And it doesn't have to be anything that's out loud. It can be a thank you in your head, or you can say it out loud, or you can change it up. It can be thank you to an item that's very well worn and just ready to go in the trash, and that's okay. You can say thank you for your service. You got a lot of use out of it. That's sort of the point of the gratitude piece here, is to help you let go in a way that feels, it just feels better, feels gentler for you. Guiding words. So I talked a little bit about this around ideal lifestyle. So If you do nothing else, just thinking about, and maybe you already have these words in mind, or maybe it's worth a little bit of reflection on, maybe it's not the way that your space feels now, but the way that you would like your space to feel. Thinking about a couple of words that can just be sort of your guides, and they can help you as you're making decisions about items that you're bringing in, or as you're making decisions around items that you already have and whether or not you want them to stay. And then the care for a Hall of Fame item. So this is a part that I love about the method as well, is that there's a focus on the person who's making the decision holding the item and letting the item give them information. So in the case of clothing, really taking a look at the item and the state of the item. It might need alterations, it might need repairs, it might need to be dry cleaned. But if it's an item that you love, pouring a little bit of care into it can be a way of keeping the item and keeping it with confidence, and can really sort of change the way that it can impact the faucet as well. The items coming in, if you see that you have an item that you already love, it just needs a little bit of care, that can be something that has an impact, and pouring a little bit of love into a Hall of Fame item can feel quite nice. And to the point around photos, and I think I'll talk about this. I'll talk about this in another slide if I have a slide that's focused on the different categories. If I don't, I'll just mention now, the photos that are in albums, or photos maybe that you have displayed, considering how they're displayed. If there's a photo that's in an album that's really a Hall of Fame special photo, maybe taking it out of the album and displaying it in a frame is something that feels like a way to pour a little bit more care into it, and to change your environment without bringing anything new into your environment, but really curating what you already have. And some examples of small projects. So again, if organizing the whole home feels like a lot, there are definitely things that you can do that give you a little bit of a boost. Reusable bags. A lot of us have a lot of them. So taking good care with those. And again, this idea of reviewing the state of it, if it's one that, if you have 20 reusable bags and many of them have stains and holes, I mean, maybe it's time, maybe you could recycle those and then keep the best ones and fold them and put them in a way that sparks joy for you when you're going to reach for them. Sorting out your Tupperware. So Tupperware is a vexing point for many people who are organizing. Lots of jokes and memes about Tupperware among organizers, and how challenging Tupperware is, to find. It's like socks, like finding the lids that match the Tupperware. So one thing I will say with Tupperware that I found with working with some clients is, and this gets to the point of finish discarding first before buying storage items. Sometimes Tupperware can be repurposed. I've worked with a client in a laundry room who found Tupperware was helpful in just like repurposing some smaller items used for cleaning there. So just thinking about it that way, it doesn't necessarily, if you have Tupperware that doesn't have its lid, it could be recycled, or it could be repurposed. Picking a drawer and just sorting out that drawer sometimes can be very satisfying. And I put kitchen towels here. And I don't think I have talked about the vertical folding or the file folding in the KonMari method. This is a part, again, that may or may not spark joy, but the idea is that rather than stacking items when folding, that the vertical fold allows you to see items as you open a drawer. So if you can see an item and you know where it is, you're more likely to use it. You're more likely to love it or let go of it if it doesn't spark joy. So I find that helpful. And it also it's a bit of a space saver. Tidying your car, so you can apply the KonMari method to your car and work through the categories. If you have all the categories or some of the categories represented in the items that you have in your car. Party supplies. I think I had this on here from earlier when in the pandemic, people were tidying and wondering what to do with all these supplies that they maybe weren't using and didn't know when they were going to use again because socializing was looking different. And encouraging people to just, use those whenever. You don't have to wait for a special occasion necessarily. But thinking about that as a category within a subcategory kind of within the miscellaneous category. Creating a power spot. So power spots can be very fun. I don't have a picture in this presentation, but I have done this recently in my own closet. So this is the idea that it's a spot in your home that can be anywhere really. I see a lot of people doing them in closets. I've done one recently in my own closet. It's a spot that gives you a little lift of joy. It doesn't have to bring joy to anyone else. It can be artwork. It could be a postcard. It could be a greeting card that was special to you. To mention, sentimental items, how those could be used. They could be used in a power spot. So the idea is just creating a little bit of something of an altar, I guess. Power spot, personal altar, something that gives you a little lift of joy. And in a space like a closet where you don't necessarily, if you're sharing your space with other people, you don't have to agree on how it's displayed or where it's displayed. It can just be something that sparks joy for you. So you can have fun with that. And then cleaning out a bag, purse, backpack. So Marie Kondo talks about how she empties her bag and her backpack. She empties bags entirely after she uses them. I have found that part of the method to be unrealistic for me. I appreciate it. I try to do it by season. So if I have a bag that I'm using just in the summertime at the end of summer, I might clean it out completely. But sometimes that can be fun. And particularly if you have noticed in working with people in the past couple of months, they may have bags or suitcases that they've traveled with and they haven't used them in a while. So they sort of become like mini time capsules, which can be kind of interesting. And speaking of time capsules, it is almost every session that I've worked with people and we come across gift cards that have been unused. It's not uncommon to come across uncashed checks, cash. So tidying can pay off. It's fascinating how that happens. I forget the statistic on gift cards, but I think it's somewhere in the billions of dollars in gift cards that go unused each year. So it can feel like a great thing to get at the time, and then it can be easy to lose. So as you come across those, pull them together and use them, or maybe donate them to someone who can use them right away. But that definitely happens with bags and purses and backpacks. They are mini time capsules that often have financial implications, which can be fun. Okay, and I think we're getting close-ish to the end of what I have, and then we'll leave some time for questions too. But this is a before and after. I don't do a lot of these because, again, it's not the KonMari method and the way that I approach organizing isn't about a particular aesthetic or about the idea of like a home should look a certain way or be a certain way. But it is kind of fun to do a before and after every once in a while, just to give you a sense of how the space can change. And here what we did is we did a lot of decanting, I guess we would say, taking items out of the boxes that they're in. If they're in a box, particularly like with Costco size boxes or larger boxes, this is a pantry for a family of 4. So I found a lot of boxes that we could consolidate or let go of. We relocated a lot of medication to different areas. Definitely there were duplicates here too. So that's satisfying to see, oh, I have what I need. Back to this idea of, being concerned about having a fear for the future and worrying that you won't have what you need. Often when you start organizing, you realize, oh, I actually do have a lot of what I need already. And maybe it goes in a different location. So we decided to relocate the medication here and then consolidate items and put some items lower for the kids to be able to access themselves so they can help themselves to snacks and encourage independence and helping themselves with some healthy snacks. And then there is the Lazy Susan or turntable, which is a secret tool of a lot of organizers, so maybe not so secret. Definitely great in the kitchen, can also be used very easily like in the bathroom or on top of a dresser or vanity for smaller items. So I mentioned not going out and buying things, but if I went out and bought one thing, I would probably get a turntable, just because it's kind of a fun, satisfying item to have in your organizing toolkit. Let's see if I can get us to the next slide. So here are some other topics. Tidying with kids. If there's anyone who's interested in that, I don't know if I can see. Feel free to raise your hand if we have anyone who's interested in that topic, because that's a whole thing. That can be, I have a 6-year-old, as I mentioned, so I'm learning as I go how that works. But similar to the slide on self-care needs and being patient with yourself, that's definitely a consideration when tidying with kids. Setting realistic expectations. Work from home space and donations. So I'll talk a little bit about donations because this is an area that I think can be challenging in some cases. Some folks that I've worked with it can be an obstacle to completing organizing or to even getting started, because there can be some guilt around, oh, I don't want to just donate it to this one place that I'm not sure about what they do with the donations, or I want to make sure that I give it to the right people. So I'll give it to, for example, I have 7 cousins and 5 kids, and I want to divide it all out. And, that can be a part-time job, which is lovely and wonderful if you want to do that. But I often find it has the potential to be a little bit paralyzing when trying to get every single item to the next right place. Sometimes just giving yourself a clean slate, and then maybe setting up a system to make sure that donations in the future are easily, they have their space, and you can easily get them to the next spot. But thinking through, kind of what future you wants to do in terms of donations. When I work with clients, I will take a carload of donations with each session. Some people do that, some people don't want to do that. I would just say, in any case, if you've made a decision around an item, carry it out as soon as you can. So if that decision is, yep, I want to give this to this particular friend who I know will appreciate it, that's great. Do whatever you need to do to make that easy to happen, and to happen as quickly as possible. I know that's easier said than done, and depends on the volume, but just would encourage to kind of keep the process moving to maybe not overthink donations as much as possible. And definitely if donating in a way that is sustainable and eco-friendly is important to you and your values, absolutely take that time to research options. There are a lot of great options on social media and various apps, and by local groups and free groups, free Facebook groups, resale groups on Facebook. Yeah, so there are options there within your community as well for getting items onto the next step. And next steps. So what can you do with this information? I had a couple of those slides around taking it easy, picking a few items, the gratitude piece of it, thanking your items as you're letting go of them. Even if you've seen the show, you'll see that Marie Kondo's Netflix show, a part of the method, and I don't always do this when I'm working with people, just sort of follow their lead and what they feel comfortable with. But a part of what she does when she visits clients in their homes is take a minute to kind of connect with the home. And it's basically like a small meditation moment, just to kind of get in touch with the energy of the home. What is the intention for the session there today? And to put a little bit of a pause before going into it. There's really some kind of meditative aspects of this method that encourage a little bit of reflection. So you can do that without doing anything, without doing any organizing, just thanking your home, taking a minute to thank it for the support that it gives you, the shelter, for the memories that you've created there, for the memories that you're going to create there. And then the thank you to the items that you're letting go of. And then what were the other ones? The guiding words, thinking of a few words that describe how you want to feel in your space, whether you feel that way currently or how you want to feel in your space. Few other resources. So I don't know if I have the Spark Joy podcast on here, but I can put that in the chat, the name of it. So the Spark Joy podcast has, I think, close to 200 episodes, and it was led by two master KonMari consultants. One is located in Chicago, Kristen Ivy, of For the Love of Tidy, and she is still active. And then there's Karen Sochi, who's based in New York. So I put Spark podcast. I meant to put Spark Joy. So this is actually a wonderful resource that I will listen to occasionally when I'm working with a client or on the way to a client's home, just to get grounded in a particular aspect of the method. And it goes beyond the KonMari method too, because the idea here is that, again, organizing is not about organizing. It's about how you want to feel in your space. It's about how your items in your life support you in your ideal lifestyle now. So that's a wonderful podcast to check out. I think they stopped recording episodes during the pandemic. I don't know if they plan to come back, but it's a great resource. And then I have a tip sheet for each category, each of the KonMari categories. So clothes, books, paper, miscellaneous, sentimental. I have a tip sheet that I'm happy to share for any of those categories. If anyone wants to drop their email in the chat, I will send that along to you. And I think we have a bit of time left. So I do want to go back to sentimental and talk about that a little bit more, since we had some questions around that, and photos. So one way to get started on photos, if you have a large number of them, and I should mention this too around any of the items in the category, I don't think I mentioned, but if you've seen the show, you've seen that she brings all of the items together from a particular category. Now, this isn't always feasible, but the idea is that particularly with clothes, when you bring together all of your clothes, or even a subcategory of clothes, all of your sweaters or all of your shoes or particular clothing items, when you bring them together, really seeing the volume sometimes there's a little bit of a shock value in that. And you can see that, oh, maybe I don't need this many, or maybe I do. And again, there's no hard rules to it. There's one episode where she works with someone who has an amazing, large organization of shoes, and they keep like something close to 100 pairs of shoes. So that's fine. It's just more about keeping them mindfully and knowing why you're keeping them and knowing that you love them. But this idea of like bringing all of the items from a particular category together can give you information that's helpful. So with photos, to the extent that that's possible, again, it might not be possible to bring them all together, but really thinking, again, this idea of like thinking in categories versus locations. So bringing together all of the photos and then starting to, there's some photos, right, that we take that we know, it's maybe a landscape scene and we don't remember where we were, or it's, it's somewhat unremarkable, or it's out of focus, or, when you put them all together and you see, oh, maybe for instance, I have 5 pictures of this landmark and these 2 are the best of the 5, then it makes it easier to let go of the other 3. I'm saying that as someone who's not a photographer. So I recognize that everyone's going to have a different comfort level around that, but it can be helpful to get a start on photos, to think about it that way. Photos where it's like, I don't even know who's in this photo. I don't know who's in this photo. I don't know where we were. It's out of focus. The ones that are like the low hanging fruit ones can be easier as you're starting to curate. And then, and the photos and albums along with negatives and notations in the album pages. Yeah, I mean, here I would say, again, this is why sentimental is last, because by this time you've made a lot of decisions. So it's going to be a little bit easier to make decisions about items that are hard. Because photos are in albums now doesn't necessarily mean that they have to remain in the albums. They could be displayed in a different way. Sometimes, like if there are notations, that's someone's handwriting, and sometimes that can be sentimental itself. It can be someone's, our handwriting is basically our font, our individual font. So recognizing that can be special, and maybe that can be displayed in a different way. So getting curious about the options for displaying them. Maybe they don't have to be displayed in the way that they're currently displayed. And going through the first 4 categories, even not even going through all of the categories, I find like after the first session or 2, definitely, people start to make comments around their space, like, oh, I hadn't thought about, maybe this chair being here, but for some reason, like moving around the clothes in my room has got me looking at my space in a different way. So that's part of the magic of it. I feel like you start to see your space in a different way when you start to move the items around. So there might be options to display sentimental items that you hadn't even thought of until you actually get in there and start doing things. So I guess I would say around sentimental, being gentle and knowing that you don't have to make decisions on those items right away, and that there are creative ways to make those decisions. And another tip around sentimental items, the co-author of Joy at Work with Marie Kondo, Scott Sonnenschein, he's an organizational management professor at Rice University. He talked about, he co-wrote a book with Marie Kondo, and then he went through the KonMari method himself as he was doing that. And he found that taking photos of items that he found sentimental that were difficult to let go of was helpful for him. I've tried that before. I tried that with a sweater that was particularly sentimental, and it actually was helpful. I don't need to go back and look at that photo, but there was something about seeing it, seeing a photo of it that brought me a little bit of closure around it. So that can be a tool. Again, these don't work all the time, and they're not for every item, but it's something to kind of experiment with. And the whole method, what I like about it too, is like, it's a big experiment in your home, right? The items in your home, you don't have to keep them, and you don't have to keep them in the same place. And you can mix it up and experiment and see see what sparks joy. And I see it looks like we have one more message. Okay, we have an email address. Wonderful. I will send info to you. Elena, if you want to add to the chat too, at which category you're interested in. I think you made a comment about sentimental, so I can definitely send that. And let's see. Oh, and here's the last slide with my contact information. You can find me online at peaceandtidy.com, on Facebook and Instagram. If you're there, feel free to reach out if you're interested in the tip sheets. I'd be happy to share those. And thank you for spending time here with me tonight. I hope you found it useful. And thank you again to the library for hosting us tonight. And I hope everyone has a good evening.
Excellent.